was born in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, January 24th, 1938. I came from a large family, my parents, my one brother, and I have 4 sisters. My city where I was born is just west of Toronto. When I was a child, I was in parochial school, and I was very close to my sister Pat. In fact, she skipped a grade, and we were in the same class from the 4th grade on to the 12th grade. So she was my best friend, and we always played together. In fact, people thought we were twins. And so you may know that I have a nickname called Dee, D-double-E. And I got that name when I was a baby. I was trying to say words like Daddy, or my mother said I said Dibby Dibby Dee and different things. And my brother was trying to say my name, but he had a difficult time actually saying Marilyn. So we had a nanny at the time. Her name was Violet. And so between Violet and my brother and my little word saying Dee, I got a nickname, Dee. And the name stuck throughout my whole life. I was fortunate to have a wonderful family committed to education, and also my mother was very musical. She was a pianist and an organist, and my father had an avocation of being a tenor. In fact, my parents met in church, and he really, after he saw my mother, he really wanted to be in her choir, which he did get into, and so that was the beginning of their romance. My mother taught me, or a couple of us, the piano before I took music lessons at the Royal Conservatory of Music. So this is important because my mother really wanted me to become a concert pianist. But I felt, even in my own heart as a teenage kid in high school, that I just didn't have that gift. But my dad had become ill and was in the hospital, and I saw how the nurses helped him, and one nurse actually saved his life. So I thought, that is what I would like to be. I would like to be a nurse. So after high school, I went to St. Joseph Hospital School of Nursing in Hamilton, Ontario. I had in my heart, and some of my other colleagues, we wanted to travel. So we decided we were going to relocate to Los Angeles, California. And so in November of 1958, we went to live in West Los Angeles near the University of California Health Sciences Center. That was where we had our first nursing jobs. And at that time, which was 1958-59, we didn't have ICUs, but cardiac surgery was anticipated, and interestingly, my first cardiac surgical patient, I really didn't know how to read a cardiac monitor. So the physician wrote it all down on a bed sheet for me, and he put down normal sinus rhythm, and then he had an arrhythmia, and then he had a straight line. And he said to me, if this monitor goes into a straight line, he said, you and I are both in trouble. I met my husband. His name was James Rosebeck. I met him actually on an airplane. He had been a Marine in Vietnam, and of course I was an Air Force flight nurse in that conflict, but we didn't meet each other in a military environment at all. We met on a civilian plane. We began talking, and we shared such a similar background, you know, him especially being as a Marine in the field in Vietnam. He was in combat, and I was caring for combat wounded people. He was a single man, I was a single woman. So we fell in love, and I married him when I was still a doctoral student at the University of Utah. Dr. Alligood came to our wedding. She loved my husband. She thought he was the greatest guy in the world, and he was. Unfortunately, he contracted cancer in 1996, and he survived 5.5 years and passed away in 2001. To you all, I'm grateful that you're interested in my theory of bureaucratic caring, and also my theory of transcultural caring dynamics. And I look forward to hopefully meeting as many of you as possible in the future.
Marilyn, I'm so glad that I get to do this interview with you today, and so pleased that you agreed. And I'm going to call you Dee, I think.
Well, it's a nickname I've had since I've been a baby. So.
And I know the viewers are going to be so pleased to hear about your work and the scope of your work. I was so impressed, even as I was looking at the beginning to prepare for today, of all the things that you've done and how your work has spread. The first thing I want you to do, if you would, is just share with us a little bit about the work and just sort of how it all began.
Okay. Well, when I was studying for my master's degree at the University of Colorado, and I met Dr. Alligood. She wasn't initially my mentor, but I was very impressed with her from the perspective of her focus on nursing as a human science. And at that time, nursing was more positivistic. And I don't know whether or not we're kind of going back to that perspective, but she talked about nursing as a human science. And also, she was an anthropologist. She was the first nurse anthropologist in the world, really. And she hadn't coined the phrase transcultural nursing yet. But I was very impressed with how she shared about the nature of culture. And for myself, I was born in Canada, so in essence, I was an immigrant. However, I was a citizen of the United States in 1965, but it always intrigued me about culture in the United States, especially, we were just moving through the civil rights laws and changes at that time. So culture itself was very important to me, and also human caring. And so I had the opportunity to do two things. One, I had to create a curriculum in my master's program for what would be a baccalaureate education program after graduation. And I had Dr. Rose McKay, who was a wonderful nursing educator and really focused on nursing theory and how we could bring our own discipline into light in terms of development of nursing education, specifically at that time. And so I had the opportunity to write a curriculum for a baccalaureate program, of which then I centered it in human caring.
Oh, okay.
And so when you're asking about beginnings, and then with Dr. Alligood, having met her and being focused on human science, nursing as a human science, and then she always had intriguing ways to study culture. Most of us think about culture probably more in ethnicities, as opposed to looking at environments as cultures, universities as cultures.
Hospitals.
And so that was she had like little paper that she handed out and what is possible to study. And one said studying hospitals as small cultures. So I thought, well, I had a very deep I would say even a deep understanding of hospitals. I was from a diploma program. I wasn't afraid of them. I liked the complexity of them. And so I thought, that's it. That's what I'm going to do for my master's project, So I then studied Children's Hospital as a small culture and used ethnography. And it was really before Madeline also coined her own term ethno-nursing. So it was more like an ethnographic study. So combining the knowledge that I received from my mentors and teachers and really beginning to see complex systems, or we didn't call them that at the time, but hospitals and cultural systems and then looking at what I believed was the essence of nursing before it was even claimed to be the essence of nursing, which came forth in 1978. So that was the beginning of my ways of wanting to study. But at the same time, I did want to follow through with study in anthropology, and I actually studied in a small pueblo in Mexico, Michoacanejo, after my master's degree when I went to California, back to California. So, but I still had this belief in studying contemporary culture, you know, and our own institutions as small cultures. So that was the beginning of my interest in this
So
development.
culture and caring came
Yes.
together
Yes.
for you,
Yes, it did.
and human science,
Yes.
and that all sort of merged into what eventually became bureaucracy of caring. Well, now, when did it begin to be called? When did you name it?
The theory of bureaucratic.
Yes.
That's my doctoral dissertation.
Okay.
Yeah,
At
so-
Utah.
Yes.
At Utah. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
because once I was beginning to build this foundation with these different hospitals, studying them and looking at them and looking at caring, and so for my doctorate, I had one question. I did a three-pronged qualitative study: ethnography, study of the culture, phenomenology, the study of the human experience, and I wanted to develop theory. So I initiated also the grounded theory method. So I did a qualitative approach to this particular study with one question: what is the meaning of caring to you? I had 192 respondents with over 1,300 responses to the meaning of caring.
And now that's people in the hospital
Yes.
at different levels?
Nurses, physicians, patients, other administrators, non-nurse and nurse administrators, as well as volunteers. I tried to use all of the participants who were in hospitals, as well as I interviewed on every unit at every hour of the day.
Now, were patients in that group?
Yes, patients were a part of it. They signed the informed consent.
Yeah.
And I remember one of them signing it because we had support from the hospital because it passed the IRB board. And so they felt secure that this was a formal study, and that's when they would sign the consent form for me to interview them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, so when I finished the analysis of the data, you can imagine it was very complicated, and trying to figure out how to analyze data such as mine, because, for example, the chief executive officer of the hospital, I asked him, what is the meaning of caring to you? And this was a turning point for me when he said, the meaning of caring to me is maintaining the economic viability of this institution. This is what I have to do so that you can do your work, so that we can care for patients. If I don't maintain this economic viability, he said, we don't have a hospital. You see, so then I began to see
different perspectives.
Yes, all of a sudden that budget, that meaning system became important, and it was a turning point in my head for this analysis. And then when people who were in those administrative positions started to talk about the meaning of caring as a governance, governing the system, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then I saw the structural term political, came to mind. And I had been studying political anthropology and political culture, looking at those roles, of how is power created or co-created in these complex systems.
Very dynamic. Yeah.
And then then I had this, many responses related to empathy, compassion, relief of suffering, helping, the traditional transpersonal caring perspectives. I also had technology. For example, when I interviewed in the ICU, emergency operating rooms, the technology was very incorporated into the way that people shared their understanding of caring.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, for the well-being of patients, and not to use it for abuse of patients, you know. And then even when we're looking at the rules, regulations, policies, all those legal ramifications. So do you see how the bureaucratic
just all came
concepts
together.
were beginning to emerge from the data analysis, you know?
Yeah, but only because you did that, all those levels, or different people in different positions. And,
because if I only interviewed nurses, I might not have gotten,
you wouldn't,
you know, this broader perspective.
That's right.
So as a consequence, when I was doing my data analysis, I thought I have to put forth the argument of paradox. This is a paradox because most people don't see caring and bureaucracy going together. Well, and even some of my committee, they wanted me to call it corporate.
Call it what?
Corporate.
Oh, corporate.
But I said it doesn't cover the whole of the meaning of systems, because I already had studied anthropology. I already had a background in Weber, you know, who was the father of bureaucracy. I even had Marxist philosophy. I mean, you know, in all those philosophies that I had to study when I was an anthropologist. And so I presented my argument strong enough. Plus, I had done a lot of philosophy, so I was going to use Hegel, the dialectic, the Hegelian dialectic, which is put forth the thesis of caring, then present the antithesis, which is the bureaucracy, and look at those two phenomena based on the research data.
To come up with a synthesis.
Yes, and you know, Hegel's philosophy is, he calls it the negation of the negation. Both of those concepts negate out as singular individual elements. And then the synthesis is a transformative process. And so I argued like his notion of that the transformation is a spiral to synthesis, you know, and then I was able to bring those two elements together and argue them using the idea of caring as a humanistic, spiritual, ethical, social concept within, you know, that antithesis of the system being a economic, political, technological, legal, and also a cultural system as a living organization. So that was how the theory came to be, and then I had to defend it because people didn't like the term bureaucracy because they think it's a negative term, that how can you put that with caring, but yet it was founded in research. So it was the first caring research study done in nursing, a research study. There were other philosophies of nursing, but this was the first one that was research-based. And so the theory of bureaucratic caring was born, but it wasn't, I would say, totally accepted, I'll put it that way, initially when I tried to publish the work, because I think people didn't see the Rogerian piece of it, which is that human environment.
Oh yeah, Hegel made me, when you're talking about Hegel, that makes me think of Rogers.
Exactly.
She used Hegel a lot.
Yes, because she also had that unitary human perspective.
Person, environment,
right? Yes, that
spiral.
Yeah, and they were not separate and distinct.
That's right.
They were integrated.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
And so, when I first tried to publish, I I probably should have maybe presented also Rogerian. I became a Rogerian scientist after, but because the work really fit with
Oh, yes.
with Rogers and that kind of idea of that human environment intergality, you know. And so it took a while. I actually started to do additional research. The differential caring was the substantive theory. You know how grounded theory has two theories? So differential caring I presented because it showed that on every unit there was a dominant caring characteristic. For example, in ICU there was a technological caring, you know, which was that dimension.
Were they concerned that they had the equipment, could use the equipment, and things like that? Or would you, to help me understand what you mean by technological caring?
Well, mainly, you know, as nurses, they had a belief in caring. But because everything in, for example, these tech units, you know, at that time they were just, I mean, they're even more so now.
Yeah.
But they were concerned about the use of, say, ventilators, but often, and here's where the ethical piece came in, often almost they could see it was beyond the value for the patient.
So some decision making about.
Yes, and nurses were, in subsequent research I did in ICU, nurses were the ones that really began to see that potential for abuse of the patient by virtue of technology, going beyond what was necessary, because people couldn't deal with end of life decisions, physicians especially. And nurses had to help deal with you know, that communication initially with the patient, but then also try to help physicians with it.
It's interesting to me how much in certainly in that area, but in other areas of nursing, how often the nurse is left with the ethical dilemma.
Yes.
And they're dealing with the family, you know, and the physician has been there for a few minutes and he or she is gone from the scene, and it's the nurse in that situation, trying to help the family make decisions and help them understand. And
I didn't understand it as thoroughly until you know, after the doctorate, I put those different dimensions together, like technological caring, because in my model I had caring in the center, I had technology, political, economic, legal, educational, all of those other phenomena around it, but open, you know, that there was this interface between caring and technology, caring and economics, all based on the data, you know. And then subsequent to my completion of my doctorate, then I began to study in ICU, and I received the award from the Dimensions of Critical Care Nursing for communicating about this interrelationship between technology and caring and the ethical dilemmas that are forthcoming as a result of nursing, seeing those ethical dilemmas in terms of patient care.
Wow. Well, that all that background is really helpful to understand how this eventually emerged and continues to emerge, I should say, as different units use it, as people study it.
Yes.
I was in a meeting at East Carolina once, and a faculty member came that was in that meeting said, "I just read out of your book, The Theory of Bureaucracy Caring, or Caring Bureaucracy.
Bureaucratic Caring. Yes.
She said, "I just read that chapter. It's incredible."
Wow.
And I was so pleased, you know.
Well, I was so pleased to have my work in your book, so thank you for that.
Well, so if somebody asks you, like, for a short answer, I'm thinking of being at a conference and someone comes up to you and they're like, "Now, Marilyn, tell me, what is that really?" And you've got about, what, a minute or two to say.
And, you know, because it is complex, it's not easy to share that within a minute's time, but I would say the theory of bureaucratic caring emerged from the study of caring in complex hospital systems. And so what emerged from that study was that context played a deeper role or meaning in the idea of caring itself, rather than seeing caring mainly as a transpersonal relationship, which it is. But at the same time, the context itself, wherever nurses had particular roles or where they were practicing, their meaning structure or meaning ideas took on the structure, and so it is an analysis of this paradox between our commitment to human caring and compassion and empathy, as well as the fact that we practice within these very complex systems that are organizational, that are, in a sense, hierarchical, bureaucratic in looking at economic issues. And and now, as we know, when we talk to nurses who are discouraged often, they say, well, they only care about the bottom line. Do you see? But I think our responsibility as educated nurses and as educated nurse researchers is to look at what is that relationship between our commitment as human caring scientists within this context of, even if we took the one element, economics, the bottom line, and what is our moral responsibility in that, to make that work. And so I don't know if that's a short answer to it, but it's really looking at that that contextual or environmental process as part of the human caring environment integral relationship.
Well, I think it's important in a number of ways, in the sense that there's a number of words that nurses use, and we talk to each other, and we know what those words mean, but those words are used by other groups, and they mean something very different. And that's what you found in these different contexts. And I've always used the example of, for students, I've always used the example of health, that a lot of people are talking about health, but they don't mean what we mean. The health is on the building, It's a health center. Well, look out, it's a sickness center. It's not a health center in our way of thinking about health. So your work, I think, that has made a very important contribution by clarifying that and hopefully helping nurses understand that when they go to the table, we're always working to get more nurses to the decision-making business tables in the hospital setting, the board meetings and so forth, that actually the terms they use are heard but may mean something different to the people around that table. And we really can't move forward and have people understand unless we can articulate clearly. Right. And that's my thing about theory. You see, that if you're speaking from a theoretical perspective where you have language that makes sense to the other people at the table.
Yes, well, I often, when I teach, I might say to my students, you're an economist, And they'll say, well, what do you mean by that? I said, well, if you're in practice, and in today's world, you might be using a treatment tray. You're scanning a barcode. You're scanning the barcode on the patient's wrist for medication.
For everything.
And so all of that is being recorded and being transferred to the finance office, and then from the finance office to the insurance company, from the insurance company to a bill, right? And so, and the other thing is you receive pay for the work that you do, which is an economic exchange. You see, and then they say, oh gosh, you see, then once they start seeing that it's not a foreign word. It's something that they do all the time in practice. And also that they are a part of,
Yeah.
you know, by virtue of being a nurse and being paid for their services, and also by being able to participate in this economic process within the organization,
Okay.
you know.
Well, Dee, would you consider this work it's sort of like life work, but is it your most important work of your career? Would you?
Well, it is, I think it probably is, but I think having seen the outcomes of the theory of bureaucratic caring and how it's being used in practice or in all these different arenas of research and administration, education, I would say it is very significant, and it's very humbling because with your guidance through having a chapter in your book written by Dr. Kaufman, who is a colleague of mine, you know, I've been able to then share this theory with so many more people. And so that's why it's become significant and relevant. Because what I feel about significance is that it has meaning and it's relevant to people, and people are able to use it. It's not, you know, something that, oh, what does that mean? Like, I look at theory as a purpose. It has a purpose. It isn't an abstraction.
No.
But it's something that can be used, and since it emerged from practice, then it is useful.
Well, my whole impetus to do actually the practice book that I do was to help people understand that theory is not something just to contemplate, but that it has utility. That book is Nursing Theory, Utilization and Application, because it's about that these are useful, and that your practice will change when you use them. And so I understand what you're saying, and so that's wonderful. Now, is the second edition of that book, is it out or is it in press?
Well, are you speaking of the theory of bureaucratic caring? Well, they would like me to do.
Well, no, I was actually referring to the other book.
The transculture.
Yeah.
Yes, it is out.
Oh, okay.
It's an e-book primarily because that's what people want internationally. But it is a print book it can be a print book through Amazon.
Oh, okay.
So I have both the e-book online, and it has if it's purchased through F.A. Davis, then there's a 150-page instructor guide with PowerPoints and exam questions.
Oh, okay.
And, so it can be.
I think they're all ebooks anymore. I know both of my books are ebooks as well. So, you know, we're living in different times.
Aren't we? It was a little hard for me to contemplate that, but I thought, yes, this is a modern era. We have to grow with the times.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, now, as we finish this interview and bring it to a close, I just wonder if there's anything else that you'd like to share with our viewers. I know they're going to be so interested in hearing about your work.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, I see for myself doing increasingly more international work. In the fall, I'm going to Scandinavia, and they have, as we know in Europe, interesting refugee developments, you know, from the Middle East, and how do we, in these Western cultures, how are we open to these enormous changes that are occurring in our nations, within our political establishments, and looking at, and again, the bureaucratic caring theory with all those different dimensions can facilitate and help us to begin to see economically, politically, legal components, and technological, and then the social, cultural at large, but still within that caring, compassionate way of being that calls us to what it means to be human, you know. And I am a faith-filled woman, and I believe in our foundations of belief in God and faith, and again, how we can facilitate and make that live not just in our own nation or our own sphere, but in the world, you know. And I think as nurses, we have a great opportunity to share what we know with other nations, including how our own nation will deal with this enormously changing global universal culture.
Oh, yeah,
that we have.
yeah.
So I see myself in that global environment as a fellow of the American Academy of Nursing, and being able to help our nation, but internationally as well, and with the, hopefully maybe with the World Health Organization, and just the International Council of Nurses.
Well,
Well, I was
this is
just going to say to you
Oh, okay.
how excited I was, or am, to be in your books. And when that time when you had me, well, you had me with Florence Nightingale, so that makes me feel so overwhelmingly thrilled. And then also when I was on the cover with the picture with Florence, and then my other mentor, Dr. Leininger. So it is a thrilling experience to be a part of, all of the developments that you have done to make nursing live in our world of nursing theory live, not only in our profession, but in the globe as well. So thank you for that.
Well, it's been my pleasure, and it's nothing I anticipated. It's developed. You know how that goes. It just takes off and develops, and so it's a thrill to me that it is, because that's my goal, is to get the word out.
Yes.
I told Anne years ago that nursing theory was what drove me about books. It wasn't to write a book. It was to be able to communicate about nursing theory.
Yes,
and
well, you've done a spectacular job, and I'm so happy to be part of it.
well,
Yes.
I'm glad that you are, and I
you,
want to thank
Martha.
you for this interview, because it's been my delight, and I know the viewers will be very pleased.
Thank you very much, Martha.
Yeah.
It's